From the moment millionaire entrepreneur Jacob Armitage stepped out of his sleek black limousine, passers-by couldn't help but stare. Dressed in a tailored Armani suit, his every movement exuded confidence and power. His new girlfriend, the elegantly poised Veronica Hastings, clung to his arm as they entered Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, the Regal Fleur. Both were unaware that on this glamorous evening, an unexpected ghost from Jacob's past would appear in the form of an unassuming waitress, bringing with her a cascade of buried secrets, heartbreak, and stunning revelations. Little did they know, this single encounter would change their lives forever. Jacob Armitage had always envisioned himself at the helm of something grand. Born and raised in Springfield, Massachusetts, he spent his childhood dreaming of the day he would leave his small hometown behind and make his mark on the world. It didn't matter that his parents were middle-class folks with modest jobs. His father worked for the local postal service, and his mother was a part-time librarian. While they lived a comfortable life, the Armitages never had the kind of money that turned heads or opened exclusive doors. Still, Jacob had that inherent fire, an insatiable hunger for success and recognition. His journey to wealth and status was anything but straightforward. First, there were the odd jobs he worked as a teenager, stacking books in the library alongside his mother or delivering mail samples with his father. He saved every penny, meticulously charting out a future far beyond Springfield's tranquil streets. Where other kids dreamed of summer vacations and carefree leisure, Jacob had side hustles. By the time he was 17, he'd started dabbling in small business ideas, from selling refurbished electronics online to launching a local landscaping service. Each venture taught him lessons in risk, reward, and the importance of forging the right connections. He won a partial scholarship to New York University and, with additional loans, set foot in the city that never sleeps. New York City welcomed him, though not with the open arms he might have hoped. The first few semesters were a blur of fast-paced classes, part-time jobs in cramped cafes, and barely sleeping. But behind the scenes, Jacob was penning the blueprint of his eventual success, a tech startup that would revolutionize the logistics industry by connecting small-scale couriers with big corporate clients in real time. It was a golden idea, one that would alter the trajectory of his life. Between forging friendships with professors who believed in his innovation and persuading angel investors who took a liking to his relentless ambition, Jacob managed to launch Armitage Solutions by the time he turned 24. The business started modestly, operating out of his friend's tiny apartment in Brooklyn, but it swiftly gained traction. Within 2 years, it had scaled up dramatically, employing hundreds and landing multi-million-dollar contracts with major shipping conglomerates. By the time he was 30, Jacob Armitage was a recognized name in the tech and logistics scene, a self-made millionaire with a reputation for both shrewd deals and generosity toward philanthropic causes in his hometown. The man standing outside the Regal Fleur that evening was indeed the product of those labors. Tall, dark, and handsome, as one might say, though what truly caught people's attention was the magnetic confidence radiating from him. His newly found companion, Veronica Hastings, was no wallflower herself. A fashion influencer from London, Veronica's poise and style caught countless eyes on social media. She'd begun her career working at a small boutique on Bond Street and swiftly climbed the ladder of fame through strategic brand collaborations and her own innate ability to craft a digital presence. With a net worth growing by the day, she was a blossoming star in the influencer world. Jacob and Veronica had met at a high society fundraising gala in Miami just 3 months prior. Since then, they'd appeared side by side at events everywhere from Los Angeles to Paris. When they arrived at the Regal Fleur that night, it was meant to be just another glamorous evening on the town. This restaurant, owned by Michelin-starred restaurateur Thomas Keller, was known for its impeccable French-Asian fusion cuisine, breathtaking decor, ornate chandeliers, hand-painted murals, and plush velvet seating, and the strict exclusivity of its guest list. Even so, Jacob had called in a favor from an old friend who managed to secure one of the best tables in the house, a secluded booth near a wide, stained-glass window overlooking Manhattan's skyline. A few paparazzi snapped pictures outside, but it was relatively private, perfect for a romantic evening. The maître d', a refined man named Gerard, recognized Jacob as soon as he walked in. Jacob's philanthropic partnerships with the city's youth shelters had made the news more than once, and Armitage Solutions was rumored to be planning a significant donation to a new community project downtown. Gerard greeted them with a slight bow and welcomed them to the establishment, then proceeded to escort them toward their table. The restaurant's interior hummed with soft conversation and the gentle clinking of crystal glasses. Candlelight flickered across the faces of the patrons, each table seemingly a universe of curated romance and sophistication. "Mr. Armitage, Miss Hastings," Gerard said with a polished smile, "we are delighted to host you tonight. Your table is right this way." Jacob nodded his thanks, sliding off his coat and helping Veronica with hers. She wore a floor-length, champagne-colored gown that caught the candlelight beautifully, accentuating her slender figure and evoking a wave of admiration from nearby diners. Jacob placed a protective hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the tables. Even in a sea of wealthy aristocrats, they managed to stand out, a testament to their combined aura of self-assuredness. Upon settling into the comfortable booth, they perused the meticulously curated menu. Veronica was excitedly pointing out delicacies: lobster drizzled in truffle-infused butter, Wagyu steak garnished with edible gold flakes, and caviar flown in from the Caspian Sea. Jacob's phone buzzed intermittently on the table, reflecting the near-constant demands of running a major enterprise, but he was determined to give Veronica his full attention. After all, it was rare for either of them to spend an evening undisturbed by the whirlwind of obligations that accompanied their lifestyles. As they were discussing what to order, a new staff member approached. She wore the restaurant's standard uniform, a crisp white blouse, black trousers, and a small name tag that read Charlotte. She seemed confident, yet somewhat tired, with slight shadows under her eyes, betraying the fatigue that hospitality workers know all too well. Politely, she introduced herself as the waitress assigned to their table. "Good evening," she said, quietly, stepping into the candlelight. "My name is Charlotte, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I offer you anything to drink while you make your decision?" Jacob's eyes drifted up from the menu to acknowledge her, and that's when the unexpected happened. For a moment, he stared at her with a confused half-smile. It was as though time stumbled, the restaurant's soft chatter receded, and a charged silence enveloped the trio. This was no ordinary waitress to him. There was a look of recognition, surprise, maybe even heartbreak flitting across his face. Veronica watched as Jacob blinked several times, grasping onto his composure. He cleared his throat, finally managing a response. "Yes, Charlotte. We'd like a bottle of your best champagne, if you would." His voice was steady, but something in his expression was off. Veronica felt it immediately, a subtle shift in energy. She glanced at Charlotte, trying to see if there was any flicker of similar recognition. But Charlotte simply smiled politely, her gaze not yet fully connecting with Jacob's, and jotted down the order in her small notepad. "Absolutely, sir," she said, and moved away to retrieve their drinks. Jacob's heart thundered in his chest. and for a moment he forgot about everything else, about Veronica, about the restaurant's refined ambiance, about the amuse-bouche soon to grace their plates. In that brief exchange, he had been catapulted years into the past, to memories he had carefully suppressed. Memories of a small cafe in Springfield. Memories of coffee served on a breezy afternoon, eyes meeting across a worn wooden counter, and the sweetest laughter he'd ever heard. Memories that belonged to a young man still on the cusp of chasing his biggest ambitions, a younger Jacob with an entire universe ahead of him. Veronica, never one to miss subtle cues, leaned in over the table. "Jake, is everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." She kept her voice low, guarded by the restaurant's ambient murmur. Jacob pressed his lips into a thin smile, shaking his head. "I'm fine," he said, forcing a more natural expression. "I just thought she looked familiar. Must be a mix-up." Yet Veronica wasn't convinced. She had learned to read people, especially men, especially successful ones. Their small tells rarely eluded her. She mentally filed away the moment, her curiosity piqued, and decided to keep watch for any further signs that would confirm or deny her suspicions. Charlotte returned a short while later with a bottle of Dom Perignon, presenting it with practiced grace before gently popping the cork. The celebratory hiss of escaping bubbles broke any tension in the air. She poured 2 flutes for Jacob and Veronica, set the bottle in an ice bucket at the table's side, then bowed slightly before stepping back. Her voice was as cordial as before. "Please enjoy your champagne, and let me know when you're ready to order, or if you have any questions about the menu." Jacob nodded, looking back at her. This time his eyes traveled to her name tag, confirming it again. Charlotte. Seeing that name spelled out was almost too much. His throat tightened as he attempted to keep his composure. "Thank you," he managed. When she walked away, Jacob leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly. He allowed himself another moment to process what had just happened. The memory that was dancing just at the edge of his consciousness wouldn't leave him alone. Charlotte. To see her again, here, of all places, seemed surreal. The Charlotte from Springfield, his first true love, the person he had once dreamt of marrying. They'd parted ways a decade ago under complicated circumstances, but he had never anticipated seeing her face again. Certainly not in one of the most exclusive restaurants in Manhattan. Meanwhile, Veronica was observing him. "I see you're not sipping your champagne," she teased gently, attempting to lighten the mood. "Are you planning to talk about what's going on, or do I need to guess?" He tried a nonchalant shrug. "I just need a second. It's not a big deal." Veronica narrowed her eyes, but let it slide. For now. She had her own methodology. Sometimes, pressing too hard, too soon, did more harm than good. If Jacob was tangled up in confusion, it might be better to let him unravel it himself, at least initially. Throughout the next few minutes, Jacob and Veronica made small talk about upcoming events, a charity gala next month, potential vacation destinations, and the upcoming product launch for Armitage Solutions. Jacob forced himself to focus on something besides the swirl of memories, but every time he glanced around the restaurant, he sensed Charlotte in his peripheral vision. It was as though his entire being had become attuned to her presence, no matter how discreet or silent she was. After a while, Charlotte returned to take their orders. Veronica spoke enthusiastically about the steak with black truffle sauce. Jacob, momentarily lost, ordered the seared scallops with a side of saffron risotto without fully processing his words. The entire time, he couldn't help but note how Charlotte addressed him, politely and professionally. She didn't say anything out of place, didn't indicate any sign of familiarity. Jacob wondered if she recognized him. How could she not? They had once been inseparable. His question soon found an answer. As Charlotte turned to leave with their orders, her eyes inadvertently locked with Jacob's. In that fleeting instant, something shifted in her expression, a flash of disbelief, recognition, and a pang of hurt. Then she quickly looked away and continued toward the kitchen. She had recognized him all right. That was obvious now. Jacob inhaled sharply. An onslaught of memories raged in his chest, memories of gentle smiles, stolen kisses, and heartbreak. Years ago, when he had been a hopeful college student visiting Springfield during breaks, he and Charlotte had been deeply in love. She worked part-time at a local cafe to save up for nursing school, while he was drowning in entrepreneurial dreams and tech prototypes. They were young, spirited, and sure they'd conquer the world together. But as Jacob's ambitions soared, his attention drifted. A series of miscommunications, financial burdens, and conflicting life goals led them to break up. She needed stability, and he was chasing a world of infinite possibility. It ended in an argument that shattered them both. Jacob left Springfield for good soon after, eventually becoming the unstoppable success story that graced Forbes covers and broadcast interviews. Charlotte, apparently, had made her way to Manhattan in a very different capacity. Now, as dinner progressed, Jacob found it incredibly challenging to keep up with Veronica's chatter. She was discussing brand deals, the synergy between fashion influencers, and how much she was enjoying the exclusivity of the Regal Fleur. Every so often, he offered a nod or a knowing smile, but his mind was elsewhere, entirely preoccupied by the past. Meanwhile, Charlotte stayed in the background, attentive yet distant, never lingering any longer than needed at their table. It made Jacob uneasy, like there was an unspoken conversation between them, growing in tension with each passing second. Finally, after the main course, and just before dessert, Jacob decided he needed a moment alone. He excused himself, claiming he had to take an important phone call outside. Veronica smiled understandingly. She imagined it must be one of his business associates. Jacob was known for multitasking. Little did she know, his real motive was to find Charlotte away from prying eyes. If they didn't clear the air, or at least acknowledge their shared history, he might go insane. Jacob walked through the ornate double doors leading to a corridor where the restrooms and the staff station were located. The lighting was dim, highlighting paintings of old French vineyards and classical sculptures. At the far end, he spotted Charlotte by a silver cart, checking an order slip. No other staff members were around at that moment. Her posture stiffened when she noticed him approaching. She tried to keep her expression neutral, but he could see the flicker of unresolved emotion in her gaze. As soon as Jacob came within earshot, he spoke softly. "Charlotte, I didn't know you worked here." A painfully obvious statement, but he needed to say something. She set the order slip down, trying to regulate her breathing. Finally, she met his eyes. "It's been a long time, Jacob." A swirl of sorrow and guilt churned in his stomach. "It has," he said, pausing for a few seconds. I had no idea you were in New York. I thought you might have stayed in Massachusetts, maybe gone to nursing school like you always wanted." Her lips tightened. "Nursing school didn't happen," she replied simply. "I moved here about 6 years ago. Life had different plans." Jacob felt a pang of regret. He recalled how she once confided in him about her dreams to become a pediatric nurse to help children in need. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for what happened, for everything." Charlotte shot him a glance that was a mixture of bitterness and lingering affection. "It's ancient history," she said, though her tone suggested it still mattered. "You don't need to apologize. We were kids back then, and we grew apart. But still, Jacob insisted, I never really stopped thinking about you. I searched for you a few times online, but, well, you never had a big presence on social media. She let out a soft, humorless laugh. I guess not everyone wants to broadcast their life on the internet. Some of us prefer to keep certain chapters to ourselves. She paused, looking down at the silver cart. Truth be told, I knew you moved to New York. You were everywhere. Magazines, news segments, interviews about your rising company. I tried to keep my distance. He swallowed hard. I understand. This is so unexpected. Are you okay? Her eyes sparked with a mix of conflicting emotions. I'm doing fine. This job pays the bills, and I'm working on some night classes at the community college. Look, this is not the place to catch up about the last decade of our lives, especially not when you have... She trailed off, likely recalling the glamorous woman in the shimmering gown waiting at the table. Jacob rubbed the back of his neck. Veronica and I, well, He didn't know how to explain their relationship. It was new, a whirlwind romance, though apparently serious enough that they traveled together everywhere. Charlotte, I never thought I'd see you again, but now that you're here, can we talk? Properly. Maybe after your shift? She seemed hesitant, glancing back toward the dining area. I don't know if that's a good idea. He took a step closer, his voice earnest. Please, just a conversation. No strings attached. I need to know how you are. I owe you that much. Charlotte closed her eyes, inhaling sharply. Finally she nodded, though uncertainty etched her expression. All right. I'm done around midnight. But if I see you two leaving earlier, I won't hold it against you if you decide not to wait around. Jacob placed a hand over his heart in a silent gesture of gratitude. I'll be here, he said. Then, more quietly, he added, Thank you. Before they could speak further, one of the other waiters came bustling into the corridor, busily pushing a trolley of desserts. Jacob stepped aside, resuming the facade of a polite restaurant patron, as Charlotte smoothed the front of her blouse and headed back to the dining room. Jacob returned to the table, where Veronica was casually scrolling through her phone, glass of champagne in hand. She looked up expectantly. Everything all right? Business crisis averted? He forced a little smile, reclaiming his seat. Yes, everything's fine, he said, picking up his champagne flute and taking a sip. A fleeting sense of relief coursed through him. He had scheduled a meeting with the past, so to speak. Now, it was a matter of waiting. What Jacob failed to notice, though, was the way Veronica's eyes narrowed a fraction. She was no fool. The tension in Jacob's posture, his abrupt decision to leave the table, the entire way he seemed riled up by something in this restaurant. It was too peculiar to be dismissed as an ordinary phone call. She had a distinct suspicion it had to do with the waitress, Charlotte. The earlier glances they had exchanged were not lost on her. Veronica just needed the right timing to pry it out of him. For now, she let him believe she was unaware, offering a gentle smile as though everything were normal. Dessert arrived soon after, a flawless presentation of molten chocolate cake for Veronica, and a delicate trio of sorbets for Jacob. Charlotte served them swiftly, hardly meeting their eyes. Jacob caught her gaze once and offered the smallest nod, a wordless reminder of their arrangement for later that evening. She gave nothing away in return, gracefully stepping back into the subdued hustle of the restaurant. Veronica, for her part, pretended not to notice their subtle exchange, but her curiosity was aflame. They finished dessert and lingered over coffee, a tradition Jacob enjoyed. Typically, This was the time he'd lean in and plan the next stage of the evening, maybe an after-party at a chic lounge, or a quieter late-night stroll along the Hudson. But tonight he was unusually silent, as though contemplating something of immense weight. Veronica tapped her manicured nails softly against the table, scanning his face. Eventually, she decided to speak up. "Jake," she said softly, "you seem distracted tonight. Is something on your mind?" He managed a faint, apologetic smile. "Just a lot going on at work, I guess. The new product launch is getting complicated. I'm sorry if I haven't been as present as usual." Veronica nodded slowly. "I understand. I just hope everything else is okay." She paused, fixing him with a more direct gaze. "And if there is something you want to talk about, you can tell me. I'm here." Jacob hesitated, then leaned over to plant a soft kiss on her cheek. "Thank you. Really, I appreciate that." But he offered no additional details, which confirmed Veronica's suspicion that his mood shift was not, in fact, work-related. When the check came, Jacob slipped his black Amex card onto the silver tray, quietly settling the bill. The meal, replete with the champagne, was undoubtedly hundreds, if not thousands, of dollars. To him it was an afterthought, the cost overshadowed by the emotional toll of seeing Charlotte. Usually, he would leave a generous tip directly on the table, but tonight he specifically told Gerard that he'd like to handle the gratuity with the waitress personally. Gerard, eager to please such a wealthy client, smiled and nodded. Veronica stood, picking up her evening clutch. "Shall we go?" she asked brightly, expecting to hail their limousine or perhaps head to the lounge at the Mandarin Hotel next door. Jacob glanced at the time on his phone. It was just shy of 11 p.m. Charlotte's shift wouldn't end until midnight. He felt a pang of anxiety. If he left now, would he be able to keep his promise to wait for Charlotte? Or should he ask Veronica to head back to the penthouse so he could conveniently handle another business call and return here alone? He cleared his throat. "Veronica, do you mind if we have a quick nightcap at the bar? I've always wanted to check out the Regal Fleurs lounge. They say it has a great view of the city. I'm sure the driver can wait." She arched a suspicious eyebrow, but her voice remained cordial. "Of course. That sounds nice." Internally, she was intrigued by this abrupt extension of the evening. As far as she knew, Jacob rarely lingered at restaurants after paying the bill, but she agreed with a gracious smile, letting him lead her down the corridor to the bar area. The Regal Fleurs lounge was adorned with more subdued lighting than the main dining room, featuring deep mahogany furniture and plush armchairs arranged around a sleek circular bar. A pianist played soft tunes in the corner, setting a romantic backdrop. Veronica seated herself in one of the high-backed chairs while Jacob went to speak with the bartender. He ordered a neat whiskey for himself and a signature cocktail for Veronica. When he returned with the drinks, Veronica tried to engage in light conversation, but it was clear Jacob's mind was elsewhere. 15 minutes passed, then 30. She sipped her cocktail slowly, keenly aware of his repeated glances toward the corridor that led to the staff area. Finally, around 11:45 p.m., Veronica decided to confront the situation more directly. "Jake," she murmured, leaning in so no one else could hear, "I can see you keep looking toward the hallway. Are you waiting for that waitress?" He froze mid-sip of his whiskey, surprised at her directness. Why would you say that?" A thin, knowing smile curved her lips. "Because I'm not blind, and I'm not naive. You recognized her. She recognized you. I'd like to know what's going on." Jacob let out a careful breath, placing his glass on a small side table. "I didn't want to bother you with this, especially not tonight," he began, choosing his words cautiously. That waitress. Her name is Charlotte. She's someone I used to know in Springfield, a very long time ago." Veronica raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to elaborate. He sighed, realizing he had no choice but to continue. "We were close. Actually, we were in love. But that was many years ago. We ended things, and I never expected to see her again." Veronica listened without interrupting. Once he paused, she asked calmly, "Why didn't you just tell me?" Jacob looked at her, a mixture of apology and confusion. "I guess I didn't want to stir up any drama or overshadow our evening. It's not like I planned on meeting her again." "And now?" Veronica pressed gently. He ran a hand through his hair. "I told her I'd wait around so we could talk. Just to catch up, maybe get some closure. I'm not trying to disrespect you or anything. It's just an old chapter of my life that appeared out of nowhere tonight, and I feel like I owe her a conversation." Veronica measured his words. His explanation seemed genuine enough, and while she felt a pang of jealousy, this woman obviously meant something to him. She also recognized she had no moral ground to forbid him from talking to a piece of his past. Finally, she nodded. "I see. Well, do you want me to wait with you?" Jacob looked down, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Actually, if you don't mind, I thought you might be more comfortable heading back to my penthouse. I can meet you there once I'm done talking, unless you'd prefer to stay." Veronica weighed the options. If she stayed, she could overhear the conversation, but that might appear intrusive. If she left, she'd give him space, which could be strategic for the relationship in the long run, building trust. After a moment, she decided. "I'll go," she said quietly. "But only because I'm confident enough in us to trust you. Please don't do anything that would make me regret that trust." Relief washed over Jacob's face. "Thank you, Veronica. I appreciate your understanding." She collected her clutch and stood. They shared a small goodbye kiss, which felt somewhat stilted given the undercurrent of tension. Jacob escorted her to the entrance, ensuring the limousine was ready for her. Once she was gone, he returned to the lounge, noticing it was just a few minutes to midnight. As the clock neared the hour, Jacob settled his tab at the bar, leaving a generous tip. The pianist was finishing a gentle rendition of La Vie en Rose. Then he moved toward the corridor where he and Charlotte had spoken earlier. Sure enough, just around midnight, he saw her exit the staff area, wearing a light coat over her uniform. She spotted him, but seemed uncertain about approaching. Jacob took the initiative, stepping closer. "Thank you for meeting me," he said softly. She nodded, glancing around. The corridor was nearly empty, save for a single busboy wiping down a counter. "Let's talk outside," she replied, her voice taut with complex emotion. "I need some fresh air." They slipped out a side exit into an alley adjacent to the restaurant. Even the Regal Fleurs alley was somewhat upscale, clean, well lit, with manicured potted plants framing the employee entrance. Distant city lights flickered along Manhattan's skyline. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of a decade pressing down on them. Finally, Charlotte spoke. "So, you're a big success now, and you have a beautiful girlfriend." There was no anger in her tone, just an observational melancholy. Jacob's breath formed a small cloud in the crisp night air. "I've been lucky," he admitted. "The business took off, and it's been a whirlwind since then. What about you? I never imagined I'd find you here in Manhattan working as a waitress." She gave a brittle laugh. "I wanted to move away from Springfield, needed a fresh start. I made it to New York, took some jobs, hotels, restaurants. I was saving for school, but life kept throwing curveballs." A shadow passed over her face. My mum got sick, needed financial help for treatments. By the time that was over, I couldn't afford tuition anymore, and the hospital bills were massive. Since then, I've been doing my best to get by. Jacob's chest tightened. I'm so sorry, Charlotte. I wish I could have helped. If I had known. She raised a hand, cutting him off gently. I didn't want your pity money, Jake, and we weren't exactly on speaking terms. I've been getting by. I might not be living in a penthouse, but I've managed to keep a roof over my head. He exhaled, leaning against the brick wall. It hurts me to see you struggling when I have the resources to help. She shrugged. We're not together anymore. You don't owe me anything. They stood there, the air thick with unresolved feelings. Eventually, Jacob spoke up again. Look, I'm sorry for the past. I know I was obsessed with my ambitions. I put my dreams ahead of us. I know it caused damage. Charlotte's eyes glossed over with unshed tears, but she blinked them away. Maybe we were just too young, she whispered. Too naive. We wanted to take on the world, but our paths diverged. You moved on. I tried to too. Jacob reached out cautiously, laying a hand on her shoulder. To his surprise, she didn't pull away. Instead, she offered a weak smile of forgiveness. We both made choices, she said, her voice trembling. And now we're here. They lingered for a moment in that tenuous space, not quite sure what to say next. The city's distant horns and the rustle of late-night traffic provided a faint soundtrack. Jacob could sense the conversation teetering at a crossroad. Either they'd say goodbye for good, or they'd open a door to something else. At that precise moment, the side door swung open, and one of Charlotte's co-workers stepped out carrying a bag of trash. He paused, eyeing them curiously, before proceeding to the dumpster. Charlotte stepped back from Jacob's touch, clearing her throat. Anyway, she said, her tone more composed now, we should probably say good night. You have somewhere else to be, I'm sure. Jacob took a small step forward. Would it be crazy for me to ask if I can see you again? Maybe help you with some of those bills, or at least talk more. She shook her head. Jake, I don't want to be your charity case. That's not what tonight was about. I just wanted closure. I needed to see that you're happy, living the life you always dreamed, that maybe it was worth everything we lost. He felt an ache in his chest. And is it worth it? A soft, sad smile curved her lips. That's not for me to decide. But you're here, successful, with a beautiful girlfriend. If you're content, then maybe it was worth it. Jacob wanted to argue that he wasn't truly content, that a piece of him had always been missing, but it felt unfair to spring that on her. She had her own burdens. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. I want you to know. If you ever need anything at all, please contact me. I'll help, no questions asked. Charlotte pursed her lips, hesitating. Then, slowly, she took out her phone and handed it to him. He input his personal number, the one he gave only to people he trusted. He hit save and handed it back. She glanced at the screen and nodded once, storing it away in her pocket. I guess this is goodbye then, she said quietly, stepping back. Thanks for waiting. He longed to embrace her, but he sensed it might only complicate things. Instead, he gave a solemn nod. Take care, Charlotte. She walked away, rounding the corner of the alley until she disappeared into the street's sparse late-night crowd. For a long moment, Jacob stood there, hands in his pockets, gazing at the spot where she'd vanished. A swirl of conflicting emotions churned within him. Regret, nostalgia, relief, guilt. With a resigned sigh, He turned around, heading back into the Regal Fleur to collect his coat and call his driver. It was time to return to Veronica and his penthouse, back to the life he'd built since leaving that small Massachusetts town. Yet as he slipped into the limousine and it glided through Manhattan's glittering streets, Jacob couldn't ignore the hollow ache in his chest. Perhaps his lofty ambitions had indeed come at a steep price. He'd acquired everything he thought he wanted: wealth, success, prestige, but lost something intangible yet vital along the way. Part of him hoped that crossing paths with Charlotte might lead to some sort of second chance. Another part feared it was too late, that the gap between their worlds was now insurmountable. When he arrived at his high-rise, Veronica was waiting. She'd changed into a satin robe, hair let loose around her shoulders, sitting on the couch with a glass of wine. She turned to him as he entered, searching his expression. Jacob offered a faint smile and sat beside her, leaning in for a soft kiss. She accepted, but pulled back to hold his gaze. "How did it go?" she asked. No anger, just curiosity. He sank into the plush cushions, letting out a weary exhale. "We just talked. It was emotional. I haven't seen her in so long." Veronica placed a hand gently on his chest. "And do you feel better now?" Jacob thought about it for a moment. Yes, in a way. Also, unsettled. She nodded, letting the silence stretch before asking, "Are you going to see her again?" He paused, staring at the twinkling city lights beyond the penthouse's floor-to-ceiling windows. "I don't know," he admitted. "I gave her my number, but it's up to her. I don't want to force anything. I just want to help if I can." Veronica pursed her lips, then leaned her head against his shoulder. "You have a good heart. Despite all your ambition, it's something I've always admired about you." He curled an arm around her, kissing the top of her head. He was grateful she hadn't erupted in jealousy or anger. "Thank you for understanding," he whispered. "I promise I won't let this come between us." She closed her eyes. "I trust you, Jake, but I also think you need to figure out exactly what you want. Sometimes unresolved feelings can fester." Jacob let the thought settle in his mind. "You're right. I'll sort it out." That night, while Veronica slept soundly at his side, Jacob found himself staring at the dark ceiling. His mind raced through countless what-ifs. What if he and Charlotte had never broken up? What if they'd found a way to stick it out? What if they'd confronted adversity together? Each question twisted like a knife in his heart. His phone lay on the nightstand, silent and unmoving. He wondered if Charlotte would ever call or text. Unsure of his feelings, he found it difficult to fall asleep, drifting off only when the earliest hints of dawn began coloring the sky. The next few days were hectic. Jacob's schedule was brimming with meetings, investor calls, and final touches on a major product launch for Armitage Solutions. Veronica had her own commitments: brand shoots, collaborations, and planning for a fashion event in Milan. Yet in the midst of this swirl, Jacob's mind kept returning to Charlotte. He'd reflexively check his phone, half expecting some sort of message. But nothing came. With each day that passed without contact, the encounter in the restaurant felt more dreamlike, an episode from a parallel life. A week later, on a calm Friday evening, Jacob found himself alone in the penthouse. Veronica was in London for a special event, and the city lights outside glimmered like scattered diamonds. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, trying to unwind, and that's when his phone vibrated on the table. He glanced at the screen. Unknown number. "Hey, it's Charlotte. Are you free to talk?" His heart jolted. After so many days of silence, she was reaching out. Immediately he typed back, "Jacob, of course, whenever you want." A few moments passed, then another text. "Charlotte, Can we meet somewhere more private? I have something to tell you. Jacob's pulse quickened. Something to tell him? What could it be? Was it about her mother's medical bills or something from the past? He typed back. Jacob, name the time and place. Within minutes, Charlotte responded. Charlotte, there's a little cafe on 3rd and Lexington, La Brise. Maybe tomorrow at 10 a.m. Jacob quickly confirmed. The next day, he arrived early. La Brise was a charming European-style cafe with a warm interior, mismatched vintage chairs, and a display case filled with freshly baked pastries. Jacob took a seat by the window, a swirl of nervous energy in his stomach. It was reminiscent of their Springfield days, though the setting was now Manhattan's bustle instead of small-town quiet. Charlotte arrived a few minutes after 10, dressed in a casual sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked tired, but there was a determined set to her jaw. She offered a small smile before sitting across from him. Jacob ordered them 2 coffees, recalling how she liked hers with a dash of cinnamon, if possible. After some polite small talk about the cafe's ambiance, Charlotte cut to the chase. I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, but I guess part of me feels you should know. Jacob set his coffee down, bracing himself. I'm listening. She inhaled deeply, clearly gathering courage. A few years after you left Springfield, I found out I was pregnant. A wave of shock coursed through Jacob, leaving him momentarily speechless. Pregnant? He echoed, heart thudding against his ribs. Charlotte nodded, her gaze unwavering despite the tears welling in her eyes. I was just starting to adjust to you being gone. Then I realized I was late, took a test. It was positive. I tried to reach out to you, but your number changed, your email bounced. You were in New York and Her voice broke momentarily. I felt lost. Eventually, I started having complications. My mum fell ill around the same time, and I lost the baby. Jacob's world felt like it tilted on its axis. The cafe's gentle hum of chatter and the clang of coffee cups receded into distant noise. Charlotte, I don't know what to say. I had no idea. His voice quivered with remorse. I'm so sorry you went through that alone. She wiped a stray tear. I didn't tell you to make you feel guilty. It's just part of why things turned out the way they did for me. That's why nursing school got delayed. The medical bills were overwhelming. My mom's treatment, my own complications. I was drowning in debt. His throat tightened. I wish you'd been able to reach me. I would have done anything to help. She offered a sad smile. I know that now. But at the time, it felt like you were in a whole different universe, one that didn't include me anymore. Silence stretched between them, heavy with missed opportunities and heartbreak. Jacob reached out, covering her hand with his. You're telling me this now because... She swallowed. Because seeing you again forced me to confront that pain, and I didn't want you to keep wondering if things could have gone differently. I guess I just needed you to know. I'm not looking for an apology or anything. It's just part of our story. Jacob's eyes brimmed with tears he was struggling to hold back. I understand, he whispered. Thank you for telling me. My God, I wish I could change the past. Charlotte exhaled, a tremulous breath. So do I, but we can't. She paused, drawing her hand back gently. Anyway, that's my truth. Now you know. For a moment, they just sipped their coffees, both lost in turbulent thoughts. Jacob felt anger at himself for not being there for her, a profound sadness for the child they never got to meet, and a protective urge to do something, anything, to help Charlotte now. She glanced at the time on her phone. I have to go soon, working a double shift, but I wanted you to hear it from me, not from rumors or speculation." Jacob nodded, determined. "Let me help you. Please, I don't care what it takes." Charlotte looked up, a flicker of exasperation and warmth dancing in her gaze. "You don't owe me anything, Jake." He leaned forward, earnest. "It's not about owing. This is about me wanting to help someone I cared about. Someone I still care about. Let me cover your mum's medical debts. Let me pay for your schooling if that's still what you want. You deserve a chance to follow your dreams." Tears threatened to spill again, and she tightened her jaw. "I can't just take your money." He reached out again, gently brushing her fingertips. "You can see it as an investment in your future, or a scholarship, whatever you want to call it. But please, let me do this. Let me make some part of it right." Charlotte studied him for a long moment. She saw genuine remorse in his eyes, a raw desire to rectify the past in any way he could. Finally she nodded, albeit reluctantly. "Okay, I'll think about it," she whispered. Jacob exhaled in relief. "Thank you." She stood, collecting her coat. "I really have to run. I'll text you later, okay?" He rose as well, a dozen emotions swirling within him. "Text me any time," he said softly. "I'll always answer." Charlotte gave him a wavering smile. Then she turned and left, leaving Jacob standing by the little cafe table, grappling with the revelation of what might have been, and trying to find a path forward that honored both his past with Charlotte and his present with Veronica. In the following weeks, Jacob and Charlotte stayed in sporadic contact. She hesitantly allowed him to pay off part of her lingering debts. With some of the financial burden lifted, she reduced her hours at the restaurant and enrolled in a part-time nursing program. Bit by bit, she began rebuilding her life on her own terms. Jacob was discreet about it all, not wanting to overshadow her progress or create more tension in his own relationship. Veronica, meanwhile, sensed a shift in Jacob. He was more thoughtful, more introspective, but also more restless. When she pressed him, he eventually confessed the entire story about Charlotte's pregnancy and the loss, carefully emphasizing he only wanted to help her move forward. Veronica listened, her eyes wide with compassion and perhaps a trace of guarded caution. She hugged him, comforted him, and reassured him that she supported his decision to help Charlotte, as long as it didn't jeopardize their own relationship. For a while, it seemed like the arrangement might work. Jacob played the role of a supportive friend to Charlotte, paying off the last of her mother's hospital bills, helping her navigate some scholarship paperwork, and occasionally sharing coffee to check on her well-being. Yet the more time they spent together, the more old emotions bubbled to the surface. Charlotte tried to maintain a respectful distance, aware that Jacob was with Veronica, but it was difficult to ignore the unspoken bond they'd once shared. Eventually, rumors reached Veronica's ears, through a friend who spotted Jacob and Charlotte at a bookstore or a business acquaintance who saw them chatting intimately at a coffee shop. Veronica began to question just how friendly their meetings were. She confronted Jacob, demanding honesty about whether he still harbored romantic feelings for Charlotte. Caught in the crossfire of his revived feelings for Charlotte and his commitment to Veronica, Jacob was torn. He admitted to Veronica that seeing Charlotte again had rekindled old emotions, that, yes, part of him still loved her. The admission cut Veronica deeply, though she tried to remain composed. She respected his honesty, but felt betrayed that his heart was no longer fully in their relationship. Over the next few days, tension escalated in the penthouse. Heated discussions turned into arguments. Veronica accused Jacob of living in the past, of using Charlotte's hardships to soothe his own guilt. Jacob insisted he was just trying to make amends for old mistakes, but he couldn't deny the lingering spark. In the end, Veronica made a painful decision. She could no longer be with a man torn between two worlds. With tears in her eyes, she left the penthouse, traveling back to London to focus on her career and regain her sense of self. She left the possibility of reconciliation open, but only if Jacob resolved his inner turmoil. This development left Jacob in emotional disarray. On one hand, he was free to explore the feelings he had for Charlotte. On the other, he had lost a woman he genuinely cared for in Veronica. He considered stepping back from Charlotte for a while, giving himself time to reflect. But fate had other plans. Charlotte's mother took a turn for the worse, requiring additional treatments. Jacob found himself more involved than ever, accompanying Charlotte to doctor's appointments, footing any bills that insurance wouldn't cover, and offering emotional support. The crisis bound them closer, forging a sense of shared struggle reminiscent of their younger days. Gradually, an undeniable closeness grew between them again. One afternoon, after another exhausting hospital visit, Charlotte broke down in Jacob's arms outside the medical center. Tears streamed down her face, her reserves of emotional strength nearly spent. Jacob held her, brushing hair from her forehead, offering silent solace. In that moment, something intangible passed between them, a profound understanding that no matter how many years had gone by or how many heartbreaks they'd endured, they were still connected by a powerful bond. They began seeing each other more frequently, not just for hospital visits, but for quiet walks in the park, for dinners at unpretentious little eateries far from paparazzi-laden high-end restaurants. Each meeting uncovered more layers of their past pain and present hopes. Charlotte confessed how much she'd missed him when she first realized she was pregnant, how she'd yearned for his warmth during the darkest nights. Jacob, for his part, described the emptiness he often felt amid his success, a nagging sense that something was missing. Just as it appeared that they might finally find a path to reconciliation, tragedy struck. Charlotte's mother lost her battle with cancer. The heartbreak was devastating, and Charlotte sank into a well of grief. Jacob supported her through the funeral arrangements, the wake, and the subsequent legal matters. In her lowest moment, she turned to him for comfort, and they shared a night of intimate vulnerability. The next morning, they woke up holding each other in Jacob's penthouse, the city's sunrise illuminating a brand new chapter in their complex relationship. Yet the question of what now loomed. Was their connection strong enough to weather the regrets and the differences in their lives? Charlotte struggled with guilt, feeling like she'd come between Jacob and Veronica. Jacob wrestled with the sense that he was only just beginning to understand how to balance love with ambition. In the weeks that followed, they tried a real relationship. Charlotte resigned from the regal fleur, wanting a fresh break. She continued her nursing studies with unwavering determination, aided by Jacob's financial backing. They spent quiet evenings cooking together in the penthouse or strolling through Central Park, forging a new sense of normalcy. However, remnants of their old heartbreak still simmered. Sometimes, Jacob would say something about the future, like traveling to Bali or buying another property in California, and Charlotte would tense, worried that his unstoppable ambition would eclipse her once again. Other times, Charlotte's insecurities would surface as she recalled the lofty social circles Jacob inhabited and questioned whether she truly fit into his rarefied lifestyle. At a particularly upscale gala event, where Jacob was a guest speaker for a charitable foundation, Charlotte felt painfully out of place among the luminaries, socialites, and dignitaries. Though she wore a beautiful gown Jacob had purchased for her, she felt like an imposter, just a small-town girl and former waitress trying to navigate a world of wealth and privilege. During a speech, a prominent society figure recognized Charlotte from her time at the Regal Fleur, whispering hushed remarks about her previous job. The encounter left her mortified, reigniting old feelings of inadequacy. That evening, back at the penthouse, Charlotte voiced her concerns. "This world of yours, I'm not sure I belong here, Jake. I don't want to be constantly judged or pitied." Jacob held her, trying to reassure her that none of that mattered, that what they had between them was more important than superficial judgments. But Charlotte's insecurities ran deep, intensified by the memory of how things had ended years ago. Ultimately, she realized that if she were to truly be with Jacob, she had to be confident in herself, her career, her independence, her sense of worth. She couldn't simply become an accessory in his orbit. Thus began Charlotte's inner journey. She threw herself into her nursing program, determined to graduate with honors. She volunteered at a free clinic on weekends, seeking purpose beyond her relationship. And Jacob, to his credit, gave her space to grow, cheering her on from the sidelines, reminding her that she was capable of making a difference. Their relationship was no fairy tale. It was rife with challenges, misunderstandings, and the friction between two lives forced together after a decade of missed chances. Amid this gradual progression, Veronica's shadow still loomed. While Jacob insisted they had broken up amicably, Charlotte worried that his unresolved feelings might come back to haunt them. Veronica was still a major figure in high-profile social circles, and any time she posted an update or was seen with a new companion, tabloids attempted to rope Jacob's name into the narrative. Charlotte felt torn. Part of her sympathized with Veronica's heartbreak. Another part felt threatened by her possible return. One day, out of the blue, Veronica requested a meeting with Jacob. He considered declining, but Charlotte, in a moment of compassion and curiosity, encouraged him to see what Veronica wanted. They met at a stylish rooftop bar. Veronica was radiant as ever, exuding that effortless grace and high-end fashion sense. Jacob felt a pang of nostalgia, but reminded himself he was there to talk. Nothing more. Veronica explained how she'd taken time to reflect. She wasn't coming to reclaim him. Rather, she'd come to confirm they were truly over, and perhaps salvage a cordial friendship. She acknowledged that a part of her would always care for him, but she recognized he had found someone else, someone from his past who meant a great deal. She wished him happiness and apologized for any hostility or blame she might have directed toward Charlotte. It was an unexpectedly kind and mature conversation, one that offered closure Jacob had not even realized he needed. They parted with a final hug, leaving behind any lingering bitterness. Feeling lighter, Jacob returned to the penthouse and shared the details of the meeting with Charlotte, who was moved by Veronica's sincerity. While it couldn't erase the pain of the past few months, it provided a sense of relief. Another thread of complication in their entangled story had been tidied, allowing them to focus more fully on their own future. Over time, the bond between Jacob and Charlotte deepened. She completed her nursing program, and he was there at the graduation ceremony, beaming with pride. She moved out of her modest apartment and into the penthouse permanently, though they both agreed that one day they'd look for a place together, somewhere that symbolized a fresh start for both of them, rather than a space that belonged solely to Jacob. The road was far from smooth. They argued about his hectic travel schedule, the demands of his investors, and the philanthropic projects he supported that occasionally led to public scrutiny. They tackled Charlotte's lingering doubts about whether she'd ever fully shake off the label of the ex-waitress who snagged the millionaire. Each challenge tested their commitment, but they faced them together, determined not to repeat the mistakes of the past. And so, in a story that began with an unintended reunion at the Regal Fleur, a moment that left Jacob Armitage frozen in shock and ignited a journey of tangled emotions. They discovered something unexpected. A second chance. The boy from Springfield who had once walked away in pursuit of greatness found that love, at its core, was not an impediment to ambition. Rather, it was the guiding force that gave ambition meaning. In returning to the woman he once lost, Jacob realized that true success encompassed not just wealth and status, but the precious human connections we forge and nurture through life's storms. A single chance meeting between a millionaire and a waitress in one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants had reopened old wounds, yet also offered redemption. Charlotte found a renewed sense of purpose in nursing, honoring the dreams she'd once abandoned. Jacob discovered the courage to bridge the gap between his ambitions and his heart, learning that the richest life was one shared with someone who understood and accepted all of him, his strengths, his regrets, and his vulnerability. At last, the night came when Jacob led Charlotte to that same restaurant, the Regal Fleur, only this time not as wealthy patron and waitress, but as two equals. They reserved the same table by the stained glass window, an intimate corner that shimmered in soft candlelight. When Charlotte saw how everything had come full circle, her eyes brimmed with tears of gratitude. Partway through the dinner, Jacob stood, heart pounding, and knelt beside the table. "Charlotte," he said, voice steady with emotion, "I left you once. I'll never leave you again. Will you marry me?" She gasped, tears staining her cheeks as she nodded, leaning down to kiss him, sealing a promise that had been a decade in the making. Applause rose from nearby diners, including the very same maitre d' who had first welcomed them months before. In that moment, they both realized that all the heartbreak, the conflicts, the mistakes, had been stepping stones, leading them right back here, together. And so, under the glow of 100 flickering candles, and the watchful eye of a city that had tested and shaped them both, Jacob Armitage and Charlotte found their long-deserved second chance, ready to write the next chapter of their story side by side. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of love, regret, and ultimate redemption. We witnessed Jacob's rags-to-riches ascent and the heartbreak that followed, only for fate to bring Charlotte and him back together in the most extraordinary way. Their story reminds us that sometimes the past is not a closed door, but a path leading to unexpected second chances. Determination, honesty, and compassion illuminated the way, proving that no matter how far we stray, love can guide us home. If this tale moved you in any way, if you found yourself rooting for Jacob and Charlotte, or reflecting on your own life crossroads, please take a moment to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories. Your support helps us bring you more uplifting, dramatic, and inspiring tales of the human heart. Thank you for watching.